Makoto Shinkai. We meet again. It's been some time since we last talked about the man and his work, the last venture we went on being The Place Promised in Our Early Days, which was nigh on 4 years ago. At the time I wasn't too familiar with his work since he was still relatively new to American audiences, and I wasn't too keen on keeping up with what was coming down the pipeline. Little did I know that he was only months away from releasing his magnum opus, Your Name, which has gone on to gross $360 million, becoming one of the highest grossing non-English films of all time, with a Hollywood adaptation in the works produced by J.J. Abrams and directed by Mark Webb. You know, the guy behind the Amazeballs Spooder Bro movies. You know, just in case you were wondering if Hollywood adaptations of anime were on the uptrend. For what it's worth, Your Name is easily Shinkai's best, joining the short list of artists whose best work is also their most popular. And it's because Your Name takes Shinkai's formula, for lack of a better word, and uses it to make an actual story. Shinkai has a certain fascination with relationships between men and women, often cast against a natural backdrop of beauty that is contrasted with the space-time continuum and the transcendence thereof. From love being able to break through interdimensional realms to reach a lost girl, to a human connection that could stretch through the linear passage of time, Shinkai has placed quite the emotional weight on emotions, as it were. Even when his stories don't involve bending the temporal landscape, as in The Garden of Words, his lens is placed squarely on the dynamic between man and woman, often with soap opera results. But for an artist whose work focuses on human connection and emotion, his movies can feel inert and lifeless. Which is why I believe Your Name is his best work. Because it isn't inert and lifeless. It's still a Shinkai film through and through, complete with gorgeous tableaus of nature and otherworldly environments, but it also has an actual plot and narrative focus. Compare this with The Place Promised in Our Early Days and you can see what I mean, where one feels aimless and meandering, often shirking the setting and background for the sake of the characters' trivial minutiae of their everyday lives, the other uses the setting and background to drive the story forward to an actual climax. To sum up my thoughts, at no point in Your Name are you ever thinking, wait, why aren't we focusing on that? Like you tend to do with The Place Promised in Our Early Days. The only real connection between the two films is its shared habit of giving somewhat lackluster and half-hearted explanations as to why and how the supernatural elements of their plots came to be. But at least with Your Name, it's tied directly to character history that you actually see, instead of just being a one-off bit of exposition that makes no sense.
Although there are more matters that we don't know than matters that we do, I doubt this is purely coincidence. Eskin Skone, the designer of the tower, is her grandfather.
Your Name is just what happens when you take a Makoto Shinkai movie and give it an actual plot with stakes that follow a narrative logic. It's not emotion for the sake of emotion with pretty shots of nature. And you wonder why Shinkai gets a lot of annoying comparisons to Miyazaki. But if Your Name is Shinkai at his best, what would be him at his worst? Yes, Garden of Words is listless and lacks a compelling conflict, but it's barely a film at 45 minutes. The Place Promised in Our Early Days is just as listless and nearly twice as long, and it has the added benefit of having its focus completely misplaced, but there are still moments when the film is able to hit the chords that it was intending. No, if you want the mathematically proven precise point of nadir for Makoto Shinkai, you're gonna have to look at 5 centimeters per second. Released in March of 2007, 5 centimeters per second plays out just like its title, glacially paced with nary a bump in speed to give the story a heartbeat. At barely an hour length, Shinkai's propensity with manipulating time makes his presence felt again as the film feels like sitting through the entire Berlin Alexanderplatz miniseries. Long way to go to make a critic reference, but I gotta amuse myself somehow, because it's not like the film will. Okay, maybe amuse is the wrong word to use in this context, but is it so wrong for me to want this film to actually, I don't know, engage me? Originally planned as a series of short films, 5 centimeters per second certainly feels like it was Frankenstein from the remnants of Makoto Shinkai's cutting room floor, barely held together by a theme of emotional distance and the speed by which life and everyone and everything operates at. A soupy, plodding, and navel-gazing trudge, 5 centimeters per second is the kind of film that calls to mind all those bad student art films that have become comedic cliches. And just as you would imagine, it is also highly regarded and lauded by critical circles. Because of course it is. Sometimes you just can't win for losing, but it's not like we haven't traveled down this road before either. This is 5 centimeters per second. Normally, this would be the time that I take all of you on a narrative journey, winding through all of the stories, twists, and turns, lighting an analytical torch through the impenetrable darkness of metaphor and subtlety.
See what I did there?
As I summarize the plot of the film in question. This time around, the summary isn't so much a journey as it is a quick jaunt around the block, as the entire story can be summed up in one sentence. 2 childhood friends are split up and they're very sad. The end. Oh, you all wish I was exaggerating. But fine, if you all want the granular details. What actually happens is that a boy and girl in the 90s, Takaki and Akari, are school friends who routinely spend their time at burger joints talking about the Paleozoic era like they were trading baseball cards. You know, as kids do.
My favorite is the hallucigenia. Like this.
Yeah, sorta like that.
So, which one's your favorite?
The Opabinia?
While there seems to be a friendship and shared crush that was forged through teasing and bullying by their classmates, it was not meant to be as their family lives pulled them apart at the seams. Wishing to see each other again, they vowed to meet at a train station for at least a single night before leaving once more. But instead of giving closure, the night only serves as a constant reminder to Takaki of what could have been, haunting him until way past his college days, and to the point where he is so depressed over it, he quits his job and leaves his longtime girlfriend. That's right, he is so broken up from being separated from his childhood crush that he doesn't get over it for 17 more fucking years!
I realized I'd lost all the ambition I had. Whatever kept me going was now completely gone. I knew I'd reached my limit. So I quit my job.
Ladies and gentlemen, here is but a short list of things that have taken less time than for Takaki to get over himself. The entire length of the Qin dynasty. The Big Dig in Boston. The digging of the Suez Canal. The filming of Boyhood. The establishment of NASA to the point of Neil Armstrong's moon landing. Duke Nukem freaking forever! It's eye-rolling melodrama to be sure, but it's made all the worse by the fact that the story focuses on Takaki without giving us much reason to care about him. His most endearing feature and moment happened within the first 20 minutes of the film, where he spends nearly all day going from delayed train to delayed train just to see Akari. I know, right? Delayed trains in Japan? This is fiction.
Thank you for your patience. Service to Utsunomiya will continue in just a moment. All trains currently serving the Ryomo line have been delayed due to heavy snow in the area.
We are currently unable to determine when we can continue service, and we apologize for the inconvenience.
But that's it. Otherwise, he's just a mopey sad sack for the sake of being a mopey sad sack, which is kind of the danger for such a character. It's too easy for a character like him, the perpetual wet blanket that never has anything good happen to him or is constantly being shat on by others around him, to fall off the tightrope they routinely walk on. When they're at their best, they're lovable everymen who you just want to see turn out alright. And at worst, they're unsympathetic morons that are their own worst enemies and really need a reality check. Preferably by being beaten with socks full of nickels. Because make no mistake, the anime clearly shows that Takaki here is the worst kind of stick-in-the-mud butthole this side of Marvin the Robot. All of this molasses-thick schmaltz exists because of Takaki being unable to get over himself, which does not a riveting plot make. But hey, I know the perfect way he can get his mind off of Akari. He could just play his Super Famicom that he has on the floor attached to absolutely nothing. Wait, does he not know how a game console works? It's broken! Moreover, it feels like he was way too into this relationship, or at least more into it than Akari. Sure, she does have thoughts and feelings for him, but it's not like she too went into a depression spiral over him, and by the end of the film, she's shown to be at peace with what happened.
Call us anytime you need to, okay, dear?
Don't worry, Mom. I'll be fine. I'll see you guys next month at the wedding.
So, this whole plot is ostensibly about a one-sided relationship between a girl and a completely obsessive guy who, on retrospect, made some really creepy comments.
I knew without a doubt that the only thing I wanted was the power to protect her.
From what, velociraptors? Sure, he was 13 at the time, but from the perspective and the tone he was talking in, obviously he was looking back on that moment as some kind of great tragedy in his life. We should all be so lucky. Moreover, what was the journey that was supposed to galvanize this emotional moment where he embraces Akari? A really long train ride in the snow. The hardest thing he had to endure was that he made this trip before he could download some movies on Netflix onto his phone. All this is worthy of is being the subject of one of those annoying travel stories from hell your relatives insist on telling, despite no one wanting to hear them. Speaking of not wanting to hear it, I think the film realized that his is the kind of character that can't really carry an entire film by himself, so the second act shifts perspective to one of his female classmates, who just so happens to have this really inexplicable crush on him.
You go to the beach?
Sure did.
Practicing hard.
Yeah, I guess so.
But of course, by the end of the act, she has to come to terms with the fact that he just doesn't think of her like that.
I knew, without a doubt, that Takaki was definitely not looking at me.
I suspect we were all supposed to find her sympathetic in her plight. After all, unrequited love is quite the conundrum that we can all relate to on some level. But all I'm feeling right now is, dodged a bullet there, girlfriend. Oh sure, when you're at that age, any kind of foible in the world of romance might as well be an insurmountable obstacle and the end of reality as we know it. But considering who she was pining after, what kind of relationship could she possibly have with him if she tried to honestly pursue him? Probably the same kind of go-nowhere, dead-on-arrival relationship that he shared with his future ex. And it's not like she doesn't have anything else going on for her that she couldn't focus on to figure out who she is as a person. In my eyes, her little blip of a story right in the middle of the movie ended the best way for her. Away from Takaki. Yeah, she's crying now, but she's going to be okay. Takaki, on the other hand, has red flag written all over him. But the real hell of this movie is that this could have worked. Makoto Shinkai isn't constantly being compared to Miyazaki for nothing, as his films are some of the most beautifully rendered and wonderfully animated feature films of the modern anime era. His attention to detail and careful consideration of geometry and color are something to behold. And in my opinion, that's all 5 centimeters per second really needed to tell its story. Without hearing the dialogue or the narration right now, you can still glean what kind of story is being told just by what the characters are doing and how they move and emote, can't you? I can just imagine the entirety of 5 centimeters per second being this musically driven coming-of-age story about two kids learning about life and the speed by which it operates, tragically often in different directions. And without the dialogue and narration, the annoying and insipid characterization would have been eliminated. It would just be these empty vessels as characters acting out a universal story about young love and loss, which would have been infinitely better than the film clumsily explaining its own themes to us.
Look, it's 5 centimeters per second.
What?
Cherry blossoms. It's how fast they fall.
What was that movie? I wasn't paying attention because I'm a complete moron and there was a piece of lint in my belly button. Can you please bash me over the head again and again and again until my brains turn to Play-Doh?
Attention passengers. Due to snowy conditions, the train is running approximately 10 minutes behind schedule.
5 kilometers per hour. To the launch pad in Minamitane.
Oh, it must be an unimaginably lonely trip. Cutting straight through the darkness of truth.
Oh, I get it. The speed by which objects in life travel at is a metaphor for the emotional distance between our main characters. I figured it out all by myself. It's bad enough that both the dialogue and narration are both insultingly blunt in its attempts to bash you over the head with its themes, especially since, again, it's completely unnecessary. But what's worse is when the script starts being downright horrifically stupid.
Yeah, but he's alone today. Where's Mimi, huh? It's lonely being alone.
Brilliant insight, Captain Obvious.
Which school are you testing for?
Oh, I'm taking the one for Tokyo.
Tokyo, huh? Yeah, I knew that.
Then why in the world did you ask that question, you Nimrod?
If I'd had a tail like a dog then, he would have known how happy I was, because it would have been wagging so hard. I thought to myself, it's a good thing I'm not a dog after all.
What you just said was one of the most insanely idiotic things I've ever heard. At no point in your incoherent, rambling response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having heard it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Okay, a simple wrong would have done just fine.
Even after exchanging 1,000 text messages, Our hearts only got 1 centimeter closer to each other.
Alright, that's it. This metaphor has officially crossed the line into disgustingly literal. Can we all just give up the ghost and say this movie sucks already? Let's not kid ourselves, 5 centimeters per second is an absolute sit. When it's not melodramatic, it's simply boring. And when it's not boring, it's aggravatingly dumb, as it strains under the weight of it pontificating like a college professor who uses his class as his personal soapbox. It expects the audience to want to share the emotional weight and burden of its characters without giving them a valid reason to do it. So the effect is just watching a cast of weepy-eyed teenagers and young adults cry into their juice boxes about how they can't be with the one they love or love the one they're with by movie's end. In all honesty, the most I got out of watching 5 centimeters per second is the interview with Shinkai himself and seeing his little butthole of a cat park himself right on top of his tablet like, yup, this is where I belong. Don't know where you're gonna fart out another sappy fields trip, but that's your problem. We're still a few months out from the North American release of Weathering With You, Shinkai's latest film, and though I will probably get around to seeing it, I'm not holding my breath that it'll blow me away. But I think it's still safe to assume that it won't reach the bloviating depths of 5 centimeters per second. Speaking of, let's move quickly on, shall we, lest we overstay ourselves. Besides, I have a feeling that our next anime is going to be something that, quite frankly, we should have covered by now. Till next time.